Turn on the recording. We do record our sessions here. And let me turn on my camera so you can put a face to a name. So my name is John Meredith. I am one of the trainers at Sumo Logic. I believe earlier this week you've had my boss, Josh Brotheim, in the afternoon sessions here. I'm on the East Coast. That means I usually teach the earlier sessions. And I've been a trainer here at Sumo Logic for about 2.5 years. And I've been a trainer off and on throughout my career for a number of years. Started back in the U.S. Navy as a Navy instructor once upon a time back in 1982, just to put things into context for you. And I've also worked as an IT manager, a programmer, a network admin, all of that fun stuff. But quite frankly, the thing I enjoy doing most is teaching. So that's what I do. So wanted to welcome you all. And again, glad you're all here. My only ask of you all is if you have any questions, please let us know. Ask me, okay? Hold me accountable. So we appreciate your questions. One thing I would also tell you as a lifelong learner and trainer, and that is when you ask a question, chances are somebody in the room says, "Oh, that's a great question." That gets me to think about my question. And before you know it, you've covered things in a very real and interactive way. So please ask your questions. Let us help you as much as we can, okay? So let me go ahead and turn off the camera here, just now that we got the introductions and stuff out of the way, just to save some bandwidth. And let's talk about what the agenda is for this class. So the first order of business is, hey, what is Kubernetes, right? What is Kubernetes? What does Kubernetes do for me? Let's just see a show of hands here, if you don't mind. In the participants window, you should have the ability to raise your hand. How many of you work with Kubernetes? Just so I get an idea. Okay, couple. All right, there you go. Good, excellent. All right. All right, so we'll talk about what Kubernetes is, and you guys can kind of help me out there a little bit. I know what Kubernetes is. I've worked with it too, but that's all right. And then we're going to talk about some labs. We're going to log in. We're going to query some metadata. And basically, then we're going to talk about Sumo Logic observability. Now, if you've been with Sumo Logic for any period of time, years ago, people kind of thought about us as a logs and metrics company, right? A little bit of security in there. But, in the last year or so, we've really changed the focus. The focus has been either observability or security. So observability, our observability solution, and those of you who attended last night's class know that we can now see across your environments. Whether you're on AWS, cloud, non-cloud, doesn't make any difference. We can see across that, and we can see what's happening across that environment. And that's really, really powerful because let's face it, the environments that you and I play with are very complicated, very complex. And to be able to make sense out of the chaos, if you will, that is the technology that runs everything is significant. Now, one of those significant pieces is Kubernetes. So we're going to focus on observability, looking through Kubernetes and focusing on Kubernetes. So we're going to talk about the Kubernetes app. There's actually a lab where they want you to install the Kubernetes app, but you can't because it's already installed. We're going to talk about viewing some dashboards that come with a Kubernetes app, and we'll walk you through that, as well as the Explore tab. So we'll take you through the Explore tab and talk about that as well. Again, then we'll talk about alerts and troubleshooting, talk about some of the issues noted with Kubernetes and troubleshooting. Then we'll do a lab on creating some alerts and doing some troubleshooting. And then the last hour is, of course, a chance for you to take the certification exams, or the certification exam in this case. Just so you know, this course just recently got an overhaul this last month. We've changed a couple of things in it, and we've changed the test. So 30 questions, 60 minutes, passing score is 70. I will be here while you're taking the exam. So if you get stuck somehow, some way, I'll be there to help you and answer any questions if you get stuck on them. Our goal is to help you, not to hinder you, okay? Of course, if you've been with our classes yesterday or the day before or any of our other classes, lately we're running a promotion. You come in, you take the class, you take the certification right after the class, and if you pass it, guess what? You fill out this form and we'll send you a $15 Uber Eats voucher. Now, take a couple of days to get that voucher, but if you fill out that form, we'll validate your certification, and then we'll send you that Uber Eats voucher for $15. So, you get a chance to get something, for taking these exams, just trying to help you out. All right. One other thing I would mention to you, if you've got in your company about 10 or so more folks who need some training, you might want to reach out through your sales team, your Sumo Logic sales team, and invite them or invite us to perhaps do a class for you, whether it's on Kubernetes or fundamentals or search mastery or any of the courses that we offer. We will gladly do a virtual class for you. As long as we have about 10 or more folks to make things easy for you. And again, just trying to encourage folks to do things. Also, we are in the process now of starting to think about getting back to face-to-face classes. So hopefully we'll get those running here soon. And again, we can certainly come out to your company's location and do some training, or we do it in various major cities and things along those lines. So that'll be coming up probably after our Illuminate event. Speaking of Illuminate, in the middle of the month of September, we are going to have a 2-day virtual Illuminate event. One of those days, we're going to be offering all of our courses, all of our certifications, and a bunch of other workshops. Would encourage you to check it out. It's free. And also the second day, then we're going to have a bunch of additional workshops and keynote speakers and all of that fun stuff associated with Sumo Logic. So just want you to be aware of that. So enough of those commercials, if you will. And let's talk about Kubernetes. So you guys, a couple of you raised your hands and says, hey, yeah, I've worked with Kubernetes. So could you please tell me what Kubernetes is? Tell me what Kubernetes is, please. Type in the chat box, unmute, whatever you want. Any takers? Okay. Bashful class. I get that. All right, let's see. Okay, David says it's a container orchestration solution. You are absolutely right. In fact, you'll see that in the form of a test question. So appreciate that, David. It is a container orchestration solution. So what does that mean? That means that we've got a bunch of resources that we've allocated that can bring to bear to help your company based on how things are going for your various applications. So you've got a container of a bunch of systems, and it will automatically spin up additional resources as it needs to based on demand. It'll automatically scale down based on demand. It'll automatically, if I want to do an update across my environment, I can sit there and do that. So those of us who remember the days of active, and passive clustering and clusters, this is basically what you can do with good old computers. And Kubernetes is an open standard. So it's an open system that people can, in fact, apply to and all that good stuff. So if you don't mind, let me take your point and let me skip 2 slides. So here, Kubernetes, as David said, it's a container orchestration system. Spot on, absolutely correct. Open source. It is M4O. And again, I apologize if I mispronounced that, but I think I got it right. M4O. Basically, what happens is it's temporary. So as it needs resources, it grabs those resources, creates them. And if I don't need those resources anymore, I destroy them. Now, obviously, transactions and data are stored, they're safe, all that stuff. But various resources are M4O. And so you'll see that in the form of a test question. In case you hadn't figured out, I'm trying to help you out here with the test question. So please enjoy. And so again, this container system has resources and allocates those resources as it needs to, starts up things like pods and containers and other stuff, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. And it controls those containers, just like a ship's helmsman does to a ship. So if you think about a container on a merchant ship, container ship with a bunch of containers, the ship's helmsman drives that ship to where it's got to go and manages that. And if we need to move some containers around, of course, we can do that, right? Also, you may hear Kubernetes referred to as K8. And again, all that is we've abbreviated, taken out the other 8 letters that make up Kubernetes, and we've attached it onto the K, and that's another way people abbreviate or talk about Kubernetes. Now, let me go back for a second. Sumo Logic Coffee. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Sumo Logic Coffee if you've been in our classes, but quite frankly, you may have had a hard time finding a Sumo Logic coffee shop. I'm sorry. They're out there, at least in the fictitious world, okay? The problem is we wanted to use Starbucks because everybody knows what Starbucks is, but Starbucks is too copyrighted, so we couldn't. So we came up with our own company name. So Sumo Logic Coffee provides a great cup of coffee. And you might ask, Are we on a coffee break, or why is John going into this? Because we're going to use Sumo Logic Coffee with regards to our Kubernetes material. We're going to talk about things related to coffee and the process of making coffee when we talk about Kubernetes and the various components that make up Kubernetes. So each microservice that goes into the process of making up a cup of coffee or a cinnamon roll or whatever deals with a specific task, right? And so Sumo Coffee runs this microservice architecture, and we run on Kubernetes and on AWS to be able to scale up and to be agile. Now, I should point out that Kubernetes doesn't only run on AWS, it runs on Azure, runs on a Google Cloud Platform, runs on a lot of different things. But again, for our purposes, we're going to focus on simply AWS and Kubernetes, okay? And again, Kubernetes manages all of these different microservices. If I need to spawn off more because we had a big run on cinnamon rolls, guess what? We're going to spin up some microservices, get some folks to bake those cinnamon rolls, and we can have more cinnamon rolls, okay? So that's the reason why we're talking about Sumo Logic Coffee, just so you know, okay? Again, back in the old days, back when I was an IT manager and stuff like that, I had a lot of these monolithic architecture designs. I had my data layer, I had my presentation layer, I had my application layer, all of that fun stuff. So here's my database layer, storing my stuff in my database. Here's my application layer, which controls my logic of my application. Oops, excuse me. And then here is my presentation layer, which typically, in a lot of cases, a lot of days today, we do things through a web browser. So maybe it's a web browser and a user interface to that web browser, or maybe it's some other user interface. Now, the problem is in today's world, we don't deal with a single architecture, a single monolithic architecture. We deal with a microservices architecture. So now my databases could be in various locations, right? So one of you mentioned you're down there in Sydney. Well, we may have a database down there in Sydney for my Australian customers, my Asia Pac customers. I may have another database that resides here on the US East Coast or the US West Coast. Maybe they're in Denver or whatever. So the bottom line is that I've got a bunch of different databases, and they'll talk and they'll replicate and they'll do the things that they need to do. I also could have microservices, these different applications installed, again, across different systems across the world, so that whether my customer comes from Australia, or they come from Denver, or they come from the East Coast, Atlanta, whatever, the system goes to the closest system and they're able to get good performance. So the problem is, as an analyst, I've got to be able to see across this environment. I've got to know what's going on. I've got to be able to troubleshoot this. And for those of you in our class last night, by the way, let's see a show of hands of how many of you were in the class last night. Anybody? Okay. Oops, one. Okay, David was. Thank you. The point is that we focused on that class. We have what we call observability fundamentals. And that's where we talk about how we can see traces and how we can see the root cause explorer and how we can see across this microservices architecture. All right. And so it's really handy to have that conversation. Now, again, our conversation point here is really about Kubernetes. So let's get back to that. If I look inside of a Kubernetes cluster, okay, you'll see that my cluster has at one and only one control plane, and that control plane manages my worker nodes. Now I will have one or more worker nodes. Maybe I'll at least have one, but I may have more than one worker node. And then inside those worker nodes, I have pods. And inside those pods, I have containers. And my containers are analogous to your microservices. Those are your containers. They're going to do something for me, okay? So when you set up your Kubernetes cluster, this is basically the structure that you're going to see. Your cluster, and by the way, this makes a great test question. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you where the slides are. You can download the slides so that you can have them when you take the test, because you're going to see a diagram looks just like this, that you're going to have to drag and drop the labels to where they belong: worker node, control plane, et cetera, et cetera. So let's talk about this. Let's break it down. Again, cluster. It's a group of machines that's going to distribute my work. It's going to provide efficiency and fault tolerance. one of my worker nodes goes offline for whatever reason, I can spawn off another worker node someplace else. Depends on how my Kubernetes environment is set up. So my Kubernetes clusters will have at least one node that will have at least one control plane node and at least one or more, perhaps, worker nodes. So cluster, again, my nodes, right? Now, the control plane node manages the worker nodes. The worker nodes do the work, pure and simple. So my control plane node, again, assigns the work to the worker nodes. It's kind of the brains of the outfit, and it manages all that stuff. My worker nodes then run my software, store my data, do all the work as far as the applications are concerned. Now, underneath the nodes, I've got pods. And pods are the smallest unit that Kubernetes typically can orchestrate and manage. So I've got a series of pods that are going to hold microservices, various different things that I want to be able to see. And so these pods, like I said, are just simply the smallest unit that Kubernetes can manage and orchestrate. And then inside here, I've got my containers. And my containers are, like I said, my code or my data and all their dependencies, and they each typically run a simple microservice. So thinking about Sumo Logic Coffee, right? I want to place an order. There's probably a microservice for that. I want to grind some beans. There's a microservice for that. I want to get some water. There's a microservice for that. So everything, these little blue circles here, are my various microservices. And they are going to perform whatever task I want them to do. All right. Again, concept here is fairly simple, fairly straightforward. Data. Data is the information stored by your application. Makes sense, got it. Customer, who my customer is, what did they order, how much did it cost, what taxes involved, or whatever. Okay. My metadata is information about that data. And that's not a Sumo logic term so much as it's an industry term, right? If you've been in database work or anything, business intelligence tools or whatever, you've heard the term metadata, information about your data. Now, when you set up a Kubernetes cluster, we can add some metadata tags and fields about that cluster. So when you set up your metadata cluster in Sumo Logic, or you set your Kubernetes cluster inside Sumo Logic, we can add tags and metadata tags, metadata tags and values to what you want to talk about. Maybe you want, these are prod, this is a prod environment or a dev environment, a QA environment. So I can create a tag maybe called environment, and whether it's prod, dev, or QA, or whatever you want to call it. I can have another tag, maybe cost center, or maybe a location, or AWS region, or whatever I want. You can add those tags as part of your setup. And then this metadata allows us to query, sort, and analyze. So I can sort by some of our standard _source category metadata tags, or if I created one for cost center, I could sort by that. Or if I want to do it by environment, I can do that. So lots of capability, lots of flexibility here that you have to set this up the way that you want to. Any questions so far? All right. Then I'll continue on. Let's see. Looks like somebody's joined us. Hey, Andre, welcome to class. We're just sitting there setting the background here. So Kubernetes architecture, right? Obviously, there are going to be some physical machine somewhere. And I don't know about you, but when you're on the cloud, I don't know where those machines are. I know geographically where they're supposed to be, but I couldn't tell you the address and go physically find those machines. But the reality is there are physical machines. There are also virtual machines that you see, that you conceptually understand, that sort of thing. So you can think of a cluster kind of as an entire server room, if you want to think of it that way. And then the node is a rack of those machines. And then the pods are the computers in the rack, if you want to take that down further. And then the containers are like the programs running on those individual computers. So kind of an analogy here. You will not see that on the test, I don't believe, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. But a nice concept. Now, what's cool about this is that you and I can create abstract partitions. Again, I told you we could use metadata tags. So you and I can create a tag, like I said, if we wanted to, that talks about the environment, whether it's prod or development. And that way we can search and filter by either product development. Maybe we want to look at it front end, back end. And so we can see by CAF or by customer. We can add all the tags and stuff we want down. Now, additionally, in a Kubernetes environment, not only are you going to have a node that lets you see your node structure and your cluster to your cluster to your nodes, to your pods, to your collectors, but we can also break it down by services. So what services are running, we can break it down by deployments. We can break it down by namespaces. So you'll find that when you set up these environments, you can manage all this. Now, these namespaces really are kind of nice because you can freeform these. You can break it down by project, by team, by whatever else you think is best. Okay. As far as ingesting data into Sumo Logic, we use Helm a lot. And so that's the standard that we use. And we're going to use Helm to set up our connections to your Kubernetes environment. And so you can do that. You can use Helm, which is, again, an open standard, part of the Kubernetes standard, to be able to access and get data from your Kubernetes environment into Sumo Logic. But we've also recently added OpenTelemetry. And the cool thing about OpenTelemetry is that as we continue to enhance OpenTelemetry, number one, it's an open standard. So it works with anything. It's not proprietary at all. And you'll find that, like, when you use Helm to integrate with Sumo Logic, there's different components that take care of the logs, the events, the security, and all that stuff in Helm. For example, your security is managed by Falco Plus. Your logs, I think it's FluentBit or FluentD, your events, and all kinds of different systems. With OpenTelemetry, it's all managed. It will all be managed in through the OpenTelemetry standard. And therefore, you won't have different systems competing on things. So this is kind of a history lesson of what's happened, and this is where we're going to. And again, we have OpenTelemetry available right now, but only a couple of the services, logs, and metrics, I think, are available in OpenTelemetry. In the next year or so, we plan on getting everything, security, events, everything from your Kubernetes environment coming through OpenTelemetry directly. Okay. So that takes us here to labs where you and I can log in and we can play and we can search and we can see what's going on. So what I'd like you to do is, I'm going to switch. I would like you to fire up Google Chrome or Firefox. And I'd like you to type in as the URL service.sumologic.com. That's service.sumologic.com. And when you go there, in fact, I'm going to go there just so we are clear. By the way, I just put this information in the chat box, so bear with me a second. And it might help if I can type today. So I go to service.sumologic.com. You are greeted to something like this. Okay. It wants an email address and it wants a password. Now, where are we going? We're going to our training environment. Okay. This is our training environment. We run all our labs. All of our labs run on our training environment. I don't think our labs would run very well on your company's environment because I don't know what data you have. But I do know that our labs work really well in our training environment. So that's what this URL is going to do. It's going to send you there. Now, second thing I need you to do is I need you to pick a 3-digit number. Any 3-digit number that you want, and I'd like you to type it in the chat box. So if you want to be 007, here's your opportunity. You can be James Bond. But I want you to pick a 3-digit number. And you may ask yourself why. Well, I want to make sure you each have a separate account. Now, do you have to? No, it just works better that way. And then you are going to log in as, assuming I can type here, training plus analyst with that 3-digit number at sumologic.com. So your email address is going to be training plus analyst with that 3-digit number. Would you all please, okay, again, Bimel typed in 789. That's great. That's the number he's going to take. If you all would let me know what numbers you're going to take, I would appreciate it. Okay. So you're going to log in as training plus analyst with whatever number. Now I'm going to grab 603 here. And you may ask yourself, why did John want 603? 603 is the area code for the state of New Hampshire, which is where I'm at. That's where I live. So I just thought I'd grab that as a 3-digit number. So, but I want you to type in again, training plus analyst 603 or whatever number you want, 789, whatever number you got at sumologic.com. There you go. David, you're going to grab 7892, huh? Two of you want to grab the same number. Come on. Yep. But I already grabbed it. So I'm sorry. You guys are, when you're responding to me, you're responding to host and panelist. So only I'm seeing these messages. So got it. Okay. It's the same one you used yesterday. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. Please change. Again, you got lots of choices. And then, by the way, the password is not that. That used to be the password. It's not the password anymore. The password is fireworks, ! That's the new password. Now, you may ask yourself, how often does that password change? That password changes once a month at the first Monday of the month. And while I do not know what our next password is going to be, come the first Monday in August, I will find out. I will be notified. And if you want to access our training environment, because maybe you or some of your colleagues would like to play, there is my email address, and you can send me an email and I'll tell you what the password is. Okay. We want you to use this system. This is an open system that you can use for training. And so we want to make sure that you have the rights to be able to do that. So hopefully in the chat box, you see my contact information. Now, once you type in the information here and type in the right password, if you click sign in, Shazam, it should log you in. And that's what I want to make sure you guys are all doing. You're all able to log in. So I'm going to ask, once you log in successfully, if you would please raise your hand. Okay. Raise your hand once you get logged in. If you're having problems logging in, please let me know. Now, I'm not new. I'm an experienced instructor, so I realize not everybody may play with me right now. A couple of you may be tied up with a work crisis or some other issue. I get that. I understand that. Okay. Maybe you're still trying to log in, whatever. But if you're having problems, please let me know. Okay. So I'm going to give it a minute here. One other thing I'm going to do in the chat box here, I am going to add a lovely little document for you. So we have a student lab guide that we're going to do. So we're going to sit there and do a bunch of exercises from the student lab guide. I've just uploaded it to the chat window in the Zoom call. And if you want to download it, you should be able to click on it and download it, and you can have it for posterity. If you can't download it, I'm going to show you in a minute where you can get it. Okay. So I'm going to show you where you can get it in case you can't get it this way. Now, before I do that, let me show you this document. So when you open up that PDF document, it should look something like this. Kubernetes on Sumo Logic, student lab guide, and then it's got 6 labs, actually 7 labs. There's a lab 0 here. And in lab 0, you're going to log into the environment just like I did, just like we did. And my only concern is I want to make sure that before I move on, if any of you are having problems logging in, you let me know. Okay. Otherwise, I'm going to make the assumption that you're all in good shape. Now, if you don't mind, I am going to log out here, and I'm going to explain in a minute why. I'm going to log out. So down here in the navigation panel, if it's not already open, I can open it up by clicking up here where it says Sumo Logic and that hamburger menu. Then if I go down here at the bottom, I see my account. And if I click on it, it gives me a little menu here, and I can click sign out, and I can sign out. Now, again, there's a reason why I'm doing this. Just bear with me a moment. I'm going to log in with my credentials because I have administrative rights. I have all kinds of cool things in here. And there's a real serious reason why I want to do this. So there's a little later on, we get into lab 2, we install a collector. I need to have those rights to show you what I need to show you. Okay. So here I am in the Sumo Logic training environment. I'm logged in as me. Got all kinds of neat rights. Now, before we get into the class and start getting into the material, I also want to show you some resources. Okay. So if you were to click on this home tab in the training environment, or even in your own Sumo Logic environment, And underneath that, you clicked on certification. And under here where it says get certified, you're going to see 3 little things down here. I'm going to see 5. Now, if you logged in to your company's Sumo Logic environment with your credentials, you would see the same 5 that I'm seeing here. We have disabled the get certified and the taking self-paced classes for the training accounts, because we don't want you to take a self-paced class or a certification class as training plus analyst 789, right? We don't want 789 to get credit. We want you by your name to get credit. So we'll talk about taking that exam a little later on when we get around to taking the exam. So in about an hour and 20 minutes, we'll have that conversation. But what I want to do is I want to point out something right now. You do have the box that says recorded live training. And I want you to click on that box that says recorded live training to go into it. Now, for all of our courses, we have recordings of those classes. We have the lab guide for those classes. We have the slides for those classes. And for those of you who came in late, I want to remind you that when you get around to taking our certification exams, they are open book, open slides, open documentation, open all kinds of things, okay? So here, if you find our Kubernetes on Sumo Logic Cert Jam, and if you click on that, you'll see there's a little registration button that any of our courses are free. So whether they're self-paced, instructor-led, they're all free. We want to help you be successful. Let's remove a barrier here. Let's make it free. Now, when I go into this course, I see here's a recording that I can watch. Now, this particular recording is a little bit old. Remember, I mentioned we just updated the course last month. So this will be replaced here probably next week with one of these, probably the session we're doing right now. Here are the slides. So you can download the slides if you want to and use those for the exam. And then here is our student lab guide. So earlier I posted up in the chat box the student lab guide. If you cannot download it from the Zoom meeting, the Zoom chat, you should be able to download it from here. And to make things perhaps a little easier, I'm going to take this URL and I'm going to paste it and put it into the chat box. Any questions? All right. We're going to come back and talk about this other stuff, these other things here, when we get ready to take the exam. So just bear with me. I'll come back and touch on some of these things, like what these things are and all that stuff. So let's talk about, now that we're logged into the Sumo Logic environment, let's talk about Kubernetes, right? Those of you familiar with Sumo Logic, you know that we can query any logs by going up here to this new blue button, clicking on this new blue button and clicking log search to query our logs. Or if I want to query some metrics, I can click on the new button and click metrics or whatever. Again, those of you in the observability class last night, you learned about traces and spans and all that good stuff. And you'll learn about some of that tonight in this class as well. So if you haven't already done so, again, we're about to do lab number 1. So we want to make sure that you click on the new blue button and you want to select log search. Now, it says make sure you're in advanced mode. Well, what the heck's that all about? Well, this is advanced mode where you and I can type in a query. That's advanced mode. We actually have a basic mode that I can shift to by clicking on these 3 dots and going to basic mode. And this is designed for people who may not be familiar with writing queries in our tool. Let's face it, we have gotten some feedback that says, hey, Sumo, the tool's kind of complicated. It'd be nice if we could just easily pick and drag and drop the things that we want to be able to filter on and build a query that way. And so about 9 months ago, 6 months ago, or whatever, we came out with this basic mode. Now, whatever mode you are in, when you grab yourself a new log search, you should in fact be in that mode. Okay. So if you need to be and shift yourself back here to advanced mode, please do so. And then I'm going to get rid of what's in there. So that's what advanced mode is. That's why we're talking about. Now these, if I start typing something in here, right, it gives me a choice here. If I start typing in, for example, an underscore, it gives me a choice here of different metadata tags. And for those of you who've been in with our classes before, you know, we're really partial to source category. And so I'm going to use the metadata tag of source category. When we create a source, we can give it a source category tag, and then we can reference it by that tag. So they want me to go in here and they want me to grab source category, and they want me to type in a star and the word star here, and hard time seeing my keyboard, and then KUBE, which is an abbreviation for Kubernetes, and then another star. And then they want me to go ahead and run this. Now, to run this, I can either hit the enter key or I can click on this button right there. Now, what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at, I said the source category equals star kube star. And so what that star kube star means is I don't care what it is before the letters KUBE or anything after the letters KUBE, I want to be able to see. So I want any message that has the word KUBE in it. I don't care where it comes from. I don't care where the source is. I don't care anything. Okay. I want to see all that stuff. And you'll notice here over the last 15 minutes, and I can change this if I want to, but over the last 15 minutes, we got about 200, in my case, 231,505. You might get a slightly different number here. Okay. Because you clicked on this a different time than I clicked on it, but it'll be close. So I'm looking at 231,000 messages. Well, that's a start. I notice that some of these messages have the word error, and then that's kind of significant, right? So, but we're going to get into that in a second. Now, the next thing it wants me to do is it wants me to add another command in here. Namespace equals the coffee bar /star. They want me to add that to my query. So at the end of my query here, I'm going to type in a space, type in namespace equals, and again, it's trying to give me some hints on what to use here, but I'm going to say namespace equals, and then I'm going to sit there and type in THE dash COFFEE dash BAR star. And what I'm looking for, remember I had, before I typed this in, I had 231 messages. I'm looking specifically at the application here known as the coffee bar. So when I run this, I'm going to get something less of messages. I'm down to 1,319 messages. These messages only have the namespace of coffee bar. All right. In fact, if I go down here to my field explorer, my field browser, I can click on this namespace and there it is. There is the namespace I am looking at. If I were to comment this part out, so let me put my cursor up here, and let me throw in two forward slashes. 2 forward slashes is how we comment something out. And if I were to rerun this, and if I were to go down here to my namespaces, I see that I've got 5 or so different namespaces. So my coffee bar is just one of those. So by now adding this field where I say I want to look only for a specific namespace, a specific application, if you will, right? Now I'm filtering and I see a lot less messages. And then if I want to, I can even take it a step farther and I want to look for the word error. Okay. Now the trick here is I can type in the word error and run it. And you'll see I'm now down to 94 messages. And in these messages, somewhere in them, I've got to have the word error. So this shows me all of the errors that are from my coffee bar app in my Kubernetes cube over the last 15 minutes. Any questions on that? Okay. So again, in case you're wondering where I'm at, I'm basically following these steps right here in that student guide. that lab guide. Now in step 6, what they want us to do is they want us to add a couple of commands. So I can take these commands, I can swipe over them in the PDF if I want to, right click on them, copy them. I can go into here, and the way you want to add a new line to put those in a separate line is either if you're on a Windows keyboard, it's an Alt Enter, or if you're on a Mac keyboard, it's a Shift Enter. So if you do that, it's going to move your cursor down to the next line. And then I can do a simple paste. Now, what are these two commands doing? These two commands, this /1m, is going to create and break down 1-minute buckets for my information. So it's going to create something called a time slice. So right now I'm running the last 15 minutes, and it's going to create a time slice for, in my case, since I'm on the East Coast, 7:25, 7:26, 7:27, 7:28, 7:29, et cetera, et cetera. Should be about 15 of them. And then the next line is going to count by the result of those time slices. That's why there's an underscore here. Time slice is going to create them. Underscore time slice is my time slices. So now if I run this, I now, because of this count by, I have this new aggregates tab. And this aggregates tab is showing me by my different time slices, my counts. Now, one little problem here, that my time slices are not sorted. They're not in any order. So I could add to this if I want to. I'm going to do a Shift Enter, type in another pipe. By the way, the pipe is used to combine my commands together. So we use pipes to connect our commands together. And then I can either use the command sort by or order by, and I want to sort or order by my time slice value. If I don't specify the order that I want, it will automatically put it in descending order. So I want it in ascending order. So if I type in ASC, that will put it in ascending order. So I type in ASC. Now these, if I look at these are in fact in ascending order. Okay. All right. Now, one other thing, because I have this aggregates tab, if I want to, I could create the bar charts. Excuse me. I can create bar charts, I can create column charts, I can create pie charts, whatever I want. So you can create whatever kind of visualization you want. And of course, you can start building a dashboard with this. So all queries and stuff like that come from starting typing commands. Now, I'm going to make this easy for you, or try to make this easy for you. Here in my Sumo Logic navigation panel, so over here, if I open it up, again, here's my library of various information, my personal folder, where I can mark things as favorites, things I've opened up recently, or things that somebody shared with me recently. Down here is my main menu. And in my main menu, if I click on help, I can click on documentation. And documentation will take me based on what I'm doing in the tool. Since I happen to be in the search query, doing some search queries, it's trying to help me out here a little bit. Okay. You can also get into our documentation by simply typing in the URL, help.sumologic.com. Help.sumologic.com will get you to our documentation. Now, in our documentation, we've got several chapters. Start here, send data, all kinds of stuff. There's one here for search. The third chapter is search. And if I click on these three dots to expand this out a little bit, you'll see there's something in here called a search cheat sheet. And if I click on my search cheat sheet, it's going to take me to this area in my documentation. And I have 4 types of search cheat sheets. I've got a general search cheat sheet, one for grepping, IIS. And then here's my log operators cheat sheet. So in my log operators cheat sheet here, I can see all of our parsing operators, all of our aggregation operators, search operators, all kinds of different operators that we use. So you and I can see this, and there's even a PDF version that you can print out. So if you want to learn a little bit about our query language, you can simply go into the documentation. I would also encourage you to perhaps take the Search Mastery course, where we teach you how this query language kind of works. You'll see it is very much SQL-esque. So if you're familiar with structured query language, this looks very much like structured query language. A little different, but not much. Okay. So I wanted to make that resource available to you. I want you to know where I'm coming up with these things. It's not just pure magic, all right? Any questions so far? By the way, if I turn the page in this PDF document, again, there's my results. I put them in order, okay? And then, like I said, you can make bar charts or column charts or whatever you want to out of them. So one of the first things you do when you start getting Kubernetes data, in fact, if you want to get Kubernetes data into Sumo Logic, the first thing you've got to do is obviously do something in your Kubernetes environment to create some data, right? Then the second thing you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and connect to your Kubernetes environment in Sumo Logic. And then if you want to, you can write a query, and then you can build dashboards, or you can also install the Kubernetes app and do it through the app. And we'll see that here in just a little bit. So any questions about lab 1? Are we in decent shape here? All right then. Before I get into lab 2, let me go ahead and down here in my slides and kind of get back into issues. So here in lab 1, we ran some query, we saw the errors, we visualized the errors over time, and life is good. Now, let's talk a little bit about Sumo Logic's observability. Sumo Logic's observability consists of 3 major pillars on my observability track. Those 3 components that make this up are my logs, which are text-based and semi-structured, my metrics, which are numeric measurements, and my traces, which allow me to see connections and changes between data points over time. And yes, folks, this will be on a test question. So you may want to do a screen capture of this slide, or as I said, it showed you earlier, you can download the slides, all right? Or when you're taking the exam, if you need me to show the slide again to make it easy for you, just let me know, all right? So again, logs, we can see what happened, why it happened. Metrics typically tell us what happened. Traces tell us the relationship between transactional data, what happened, where it fell down, things like that. And you're going to see that in this class. So as far as incident remediation, as far as our observability solution goes, there are 3 aspects of this. 1, you can monitor things. And by the way, a lot of people say they have an observability solution. A lot of companies do. Their definition of observability is they're going to create alerts and dashboards. That's their observability solution. That's not good enough for us. That's not acceptable. Hopefully it's not good enough for you either. So monitoring, I can look and get alerts, I can get dashboards, that's fine. You can do that in Sumo Logic. But we want to take it farther. We want to be able to diagnose the issues quickly by using traces, metrics, and the Explorer. And we'll show you that a little later on in the labs. And finally, if we need to, we can troubleshoot the issues and find the root cause with something called the Root Cause Explorer, and ultimately looking at our logs. In order to find out why something went wrong, typically that's going to lead us to our logs, because the why is in the logs. The what is in the metrics, but the why is in the logs. Okay? So everything always points back to the logs. Now again, Sumo Logic, our coffee app, running on Kubernetes. We have a Kubernetes cluster that we've stood up, and our Sumo app is in that cluster. And of course, we're going to take advantage of Sumo Logic's Kubernetes application. All right. The Sumo Logic Kubernetes application, or app, if you will, manages and monitors the working nodes of your cluster. It centralizes your metadata enrichment. It's going to add some key values for us to help things out. It's going to give you visibility into your worker nodes, not into your control plane nodes, but into your worker nodes. You'll find that we've got built-in namespace, deployment, and service views, as well as dynamic and live pre-built dashboards. And again, we're taking advantage of the open standards and the out-of-the-box security features that are part of Kubernetes. So the point is, there's an app here that you can install if you're running Kubernetes. In a minute, we're going to get into that app and we're going to see how it gets installed. In fact, actually, let's do that right now. Let me stop the slides. If I want to install an application from Sumo Logic, I go to the app catalog. The app catalog, again, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't already know, is in my navigation panel. So I open up my navigation panel. Down here in my main menu, the first thing I see is app catalog. Now, I can click on Kubernetes, it's right there, or I can go down here and filter for Kubernetes. And here it shows me what my dashboards start to look like. So these dashboards are pre-built, ready for you and all that stuff. The problem is it doesn't let me install the app. It says explore the dashboards. One of the complaints that we got from our customers was, gee, Sumo, it's a little complicated to set up Kubernetes and then to set up Sumo Logic in Kubernetes. So what we decided to do is, look, if you set it up once, it's available for you. And then it's basically ready for you to go. Now, because I have logged in with my administrative rights, if I click on this down arrow, if you're following along, you'll see that I can open up dashboards and library and I can view overview. You can see those, but you can't see this add another cluster, okay? Because you have to have administrative rights to be able to add that other cluster. If I click on this, this walks me through what I need to do to add another cluster. What is a cluster? A cluster is an app, right? We have our coffee bar app. Let's say we create a new app. Let's say we change the oil service app or something like that. We create a new app. We can add that cluster into our Sumo Logic environment. And you'll find that you've got directions here either for Helm or in YAML. So pick and choose. And it basically says, okay, you want to do an add repo. And all you have to do, we made this very, very easy, is you're going to go in and you're going to add the Sumo Logic repo into your Helm environment. That's what you're going to do. You're going to run this command. You can copy it, and then you're going to run it from terminal window or whatever. Then the question is, who do you want to receive alerts and monitors? Because when we install this app, we're also going to install a bunch of alerts and a bunch of monitors. So who do you want to receive those? And you can configure it after the fact, but basically, you know, who do you want to receive those? And then also here to install the Helm functionality, what you've got here is some commands that you're going to modify. You're going to use and create a Sumo Access ID and a Sumo Access key. Again, if you've had our metric mastery class earlier this week, or if you've had our admin class, you know that those are just keys and values that we can use to basically run a user's credential. So we're going to modify this. We're going to run this Helm upgrade command, upgrading this information. And then finally, all we have to do is we're going to run one more command, and poof, we've now installed, taken that new application, and we've now made it available into our Kubernetes environment. So that's the process that we get to go through, and it's a pretty simple process. And let's face it, if you've ever tried to install Kubernetes before, it can be kind of involved. And we've tried to make it simpler and simpler, because let's face it, that's some feedback we got. We listen to our customers very well. Again, if I go into my product documentation, help.sumologic.com, and in the help.sumologic.com, where I say install collectors, here's where I can set up, actually, let me trying to remember exactly where in here I want to go to set up your Kubernetes environment. Okay, but it's in this section right here, send data. Okay. Here's the open telemetry stuff, or again, I can use various hosted collectors for Kubernetes. So, okay, so it is in our documentation if you need it. And so in lab 2, what they wanted you to do was they wanted you to install the Kubernetes app. Well, guess what? You can't. It's already installed. So it's real simple. We've made it very easy. We've even made it simpler and easier now, okay? So now when you install the Kubernetes app, you've got to sit there and, again, provide where your security log information is, your event log information is, and poof, it adds that. Now, what I am going to say is once we've installed the app, and again, the first Kubernetes application that you put in here will create in your library folder, and I would like you to go into the training environment. I would like you to click on the library folder, and you'll see there's this Kubernetes folder in here. In this Kubernetes folder, I have a bunch of dashboards ready to go that you and I can open up. So let's start right here with the Kubernetes cluster overview. The Kubernetes cluster overview provides for me information about all of my various clusters. Remember, a cluster is basically a whole large application. So up here I have a filter that says cluster equals star. I want to see all of them. But if I click in here, I can specify that I want to see the coffee bar app, or I want to see Travelogic, or I want to see whatever it is I want to see. So I can filter for the specific stuff that I want. And here I can see that my CPU usage is good, my memory usage is good, all my nodes are working great, life is just wonderful. Now that's my cluster overview. Maybe I want to look and maybe I want to see how my core DNS is doing, my domain name services. I can click on that, again, focus on whatever cluster I want, look at this information, all that. So these dashboards, when you install this app, these dashboards are installed for you automatically. And that's what we're trying to show you here in lab 2, that these things are here. Now, in lab 3, they want us to look at some of these. So they want me to go ahead and look at the Kubernetes cluster overview, which I showed you. Now, the Kubernetes cluster overview provides you an overview of your Kubernetes clusters. Pure and simple. Probably the first one that you want to look at. And if I look at my Kubernetes cluster overview, the question is, how much disk space am I using? 7%. How many nodes are failing or not running? How many pods are not running? How many pods have failed? 0. So I can get this information very, very quickly. And if I want to, I can scroll down for more information. So in this lab, they want to see how many nodes are not running? 0. How many pods are not running? 0. What percentage of cluster disk space has been used? Cluster disk space, 7%. Okay. So there we have it. All right. So we're just trying to show you the power of these built-in dashboards. Now, when you install the cluster app, not only did you get this great folder and these great dashboards, but we also have for you under the new blue button, something called the Explorer. And you can click on this Explorer. And if I click over here to the left, excuse me, if you click over here on the left, you'll see that I've got 4 different Kubernetes views that I can look at. I can look at my service view, my deployment view, my namespace view, and my node view. They're listed here alphabetically, okay? Also, if you use our solution for AWS observability, it will install something for your AWS observability. Here we can also look at our real user monitoring. So for example, if you've got some web applications and you want to see what your performance of your web applications are from the user's perspective, how long the page is taking to load, where it's taking so long to load, you can use that real user monitoring. Now, our focus for this class are these first 4 nodes. In fact, if I look at the Kubernetes node view, I click on my Kubernetes node view, I can see various data here of my Kubernetes cluster overview here and see how things are behaving. Hold on a second. Let me get rid of that Kubernetes JWM thing. Okay. If you don't see things in here, it's because maybe the application is not running, or maybe there's some issues. So for example, if I go into my coffee bar app, I've got data. That application's running. This app component thing isn't running for whatever reason. Maybe they shut it down, whatever. But as you go through here, I can see here's my cluster. And what's made my cluster consist of? It consists of nodes, right? We talked about that earlier. So here are, in this case, my 5 nodes. I can go into a specific node if I want to. What does a node consist of? Consists of pods. I can go into my specific pods if I want to, and I can then see my various containers. So in the node view, it gives you your physical layout, right? Your cluster, your your namespace, your cluster, your nodes, your pods, your containers, okay? Pure and simple. And I'm going to show you some slides on that to kind of reinforce that. Now, as I said, I could be in here clicking around and I could see that there's no data in here. So let me go grab a scenario here where I've got no data. No data. There we go. And there's a reason why I might not have no data. First of all, these dashboards, I've got a bunch of different dashboards in here. This GKE is my Google Kubernetes node logs. These are my AWS node logs dashboards. So one thing, if you're not seeing any data, change the dashboard. And then hopefully you'll see some data. Also, besides changing the dashboard, the other 2 things that you want to know to change, because this will become a test question, is you also may want to change the time. Remember, nodes can come up and go down based on Kubernetes, based on what's going on. So maybe I need to open up my time range here a little bit to see some data. So change your time, change your dashboards, and if necessary, change your node. Maybe that node's not running right now, but the other nodes are. So again, change things back and forth. Those 3 things: change your nodes, change your dashboards, and change your time. You'll see that in the form of a test question. You're not seeing data, okay? Now, not only can I look at the Kubernetes node view, which is my physical view, I can look at it by service. So again, here in my service, I've got my individual cluster, my individual application, if you will. And then underneath that, I can see my namespaces. So if I want to look at my services view, I can go to my namespaces. And then inside my namespaces, I can see my respective services. So how do you want to slice this up? How do you want to look at things? Do you want to look at it by services? And then within my services, I can see the various pods. And in the pods, I can see the various containers. Or maybe, just maybe, I want to do it by deployment. Maybe you've got a dev and a prod and a QA. So maybe you want to break it down by your different deployments. And so you can go in here and look at, dev or prod or QA by your deployment. And then again, go into the pods, go into the, containers and see it that way. As I mentioned, you also have this namespace view, and this namespace view is really kind of neat because you can arbitrarily decide how you want to set up your namespaces. They may be based on project teams, whoever's working this. You can break it up however you want to. Again, when you install your Kubernetes app is where you set those metadata tags and their values. So again, here are my applications. Within my applications, I can break it up by namespace. Again, this may be the education team. This may be so you can break this up by business units you want. This is the education team's environment. This is the accounting team's environment. This is, namespace view. You can adjust that as you want to. And as I said, if you don't see data, when you go in here, check your dashboard, check your time, change to a different node. Any questions? I'd be happy to know. I'm going to take a break here in just a few minutes. I want to get kind of caught up on the slides, and we'll take a quick break. So Let me go back to my slides here for a second. So I showed you that when you and I install the Kubernetes app, by default, you have this cluster overview dashboard. Again, it provides me an overview of memory and CPU per node and pod. Break things down by node or pod. My nodes dashboard, if I wanted to look at it, my nodes dashboard provides me the health and performance metrics across all of my nodes, so I can see what's going on across my nodes. My security overview dashboard, I can see a high level information about my alerts or security issues or whatever. Now, as many of you know, I hope you all know, if, for example, here I've got these 14 critical alerts and I want to know more about them, in this particular panel, I should be able to go ahead and click in the upper right-hand corner and open it up in a log or metric query. So I can see what those 14 critical alerts are, or I can see what those 206 errors are. So I can get more information about what's happening. Now, besides the Kubernetes app, there's another app that you can install, and that's the Kubernetes control plane app. The Kubernetes control plane app tells you the state of the Kubernetes control plane, what it's doing, how it's doing it, stuff like that. So there's really two major apps in our app store that you can play with. There is the Kubernetes app, which tells you about the worker nodes, the Kubernetes control plane app, which tells you about your control plane environment. And yes, there are AWS open standard versions here. There is Azure versions. There is Google Cloud, Kubernetes engine, control planes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and again, there's other Kubernetes applications here that you will find that we have. So, for example, if I want to know about how we're using stack rocks in our environment, or if I want to look at various authentication systems, I can certainly add those as well. Again, another way of exploring this is you click on New, you click on Explore, and you've got these 4 views. Node view gives you your cluster hierarchy. Deployment view shows you deployments, again, dev, prod, whatever. Service view shows you by service. Namespace view allows you to track across projects with teams. I promise you this slide right here will be on the exam. Just want to try to help you here. Okay, so again, my node view lets me see things based on my physical structure, my cluster, my node, my pod, my container. Deployment view lets me see it by my deployments, prod, dev, QA, whatever you call your deployments. Service view lets me see it based on my services, which services are running. And then underneath that service, I can see the pods that are associated with that service and the containers associated with that service. So I can break things down by services. And then finally, namespace is really by whatever team or structure that you have. So if you want to break that stuff down. Okay. Another thing that I'm going to talk about after the break, and we're going to do an exercise, is something here called the service map. The service maps lets us see the connections between our various services. So, and you'll find that in our last exercise, we can go in here and look at connections between our services. So I'll talk about the service map in a little bit. Bear with me. Okay. So in lab 2, we weren't able to do that because the app was already installed. It's something that recently we updated the product and changed it to make it easier for folks to not have to install the app, and more importantly, just install a new application that they want, a new cluster if they want. Then we also talked about pre-built dashboards and navigating a cluster with the Explorer. So lab 2, 3, and 4 are done. And what I propose we do here, folks, if you don't mind, is what do you say we take a break? Everybody okay with that? I'm going to take a 5-minute break if you don't mind, just to save time here. And so when this timer gets down to 0, I'd like you to be back here. So I'll see you back in about 4 minutes and 55 seconds. Have a great break. Hey folks, we're back. Hopefully you guys are back and ready to roll. Let me clear this tab there. Let me go ahead and pin this tab and make sure we're all back here. And again, what we want to do, when we last left off, we had finished up about seeing the dashboards and seeing the Explore tab and all that good stuff. And so now, and we didn't talked about, we did labs 2, 3, and 4, although we couldn't really do lab 2. Now, what we want to do is talk about alerts and troubleshooting. Okay, so again, in Kubernetes is pretty complicated, pretty advanced, pretty sophisticated. So in order to troubleshoot Kubernetes, I have to know, are my worker nodes unhealthy? How many I got? What's my disk doing? My CPU doing? My resources? Are they being tied up? Are they being used up somehow? Do I have bad pods that are crashing? Do I have autoscaler issues that are not getting, and I get requests that are getting routed as I expected? And so these first 4 will typically use these dashboards to find that. And then are my requests getting routed as I expect to? That's when we'll talk about service maps. And I'll come back and revisit service maps for that very reason. So these 3 are my common alerts, and you will see these on the test. So crash loop, right? Crash loop happens when my replication service keeps restarting pods, right? I know I need more pods, start that pod up. Oh, I need more pods, start that. I've got a crash loop. The pod tries to start up, can't start up, and immediately starts another pod. And so it can't start, so it crashes. So that crash loop is, like I said, a replication service that keeps restarting my pods. Another type of common alert you have is nodes not ready. I have insufficient resources allocated to a node. When you set up your Kubernetes environment, you specify what resources you're going to allocate to things. If you don't give it enough resources, the node's not going to be ready. Okay. Memory limits exceeded. The third thing. Container requests have too much memory or request too much memory and maybe destroyed and then restarted. So what happens is I've got a resource that requires too much memory, more memory than I've allocated to it. And again, it's going to crash that part of the application. And it's then going to try to restart with getting what memory it needs. So it's very important to understand what your memory limitations and stuff are. So again, we can use Sumo logic and our observability tools to be able to monitor these, to see what's going on and create alerts. And again, some people think that that's the definition of a good observability solution. I can view my dashboards or I can triage alerts. And I'm going to show you what the alerts are in Sumo logic and how to set them up. But ultimately, what we want to do is be able to diagnose that, see what's causing the problem, where it's happening. And I want to be able to fix it by applying patches, provision extra resources. What do I have to do to make this right? So that's our definition of observability. And as far as observability goes, we have to ask ourselves another question. Does every single alert or warning really need someone's immediate attention? Maybe it does, maybe it does. For example, if I'm starting up a new pod as it's going through its startup routine, do I need to create an alert based on that, right? If my pod goes down, do I need to create an alert on that? Probably not, as long as another one's coming up, right? There's another one up to take the load. So when you create your alerts and stuff like that, we need to consider that. What kind of alerts are the most important and should you focus on first? And then finally, again, when you guys think in your environments of how you manage and how you triage this, what is it that you guys do? What is your process within your company for trying to triage? Because there's a ton of information in Kubernetes. You got to pick and choose what you really want to focus on. Otherwise, your poor analysts are going to be very, very tired troubleshooting issues that really don't need to be troubleshot. So my question for you folks, if you don't mind, since there's only 3 of you left, any of you who run Kubernetes, how do you all triage and prioritize your alerts? What's the process that you go through? Again, if you don't have a process, this may be a good opportunity for you to go back with your company and say, hey, what is our process? What should we do about that? So something to consider. Again, as far as in diagnosing and investigation, right? How do we get more information about the issue? Obviously, from within our tool, we can drill down into logs, metrics, and traces until we figure out what the root cause is. And you're going to see that here in just a little bit. So, and then of course, resolving the issue, we want to probably document that solution. How do we fix it? What resources do we need? Work with your administrator, because they're going to have to obviously change something in Kubernetes going forward. Okay. And if you're still having problems, again, you can ask us for help. So you can talk to your Sumo Logic account rep, and we can try to help you with some of your issues that you might be having, particularly if you're having issues with regards to how Sumo reports things compared to how your environment is working. So something to consider there. Feel free to ask us for help. Now, two last little labs here that we're going to do, and one is going to be create a metrics alert. The other is going to be able to troubleshoot a failed pod, and that's when we'll introduce the concept of the service map. So, lab 5, let me go ahead and scoot on down here. Let me turn the page here. So I'm on page 17 of that PDF document. And what we want to do is we want to create an alert. So bear with me a moment. I want to go into my Sumo Logic training environment. By the way, I've got a few tabs here that are open up on top. Right? Maybe it's starting to look a little busy, a little complicated, things like that. Obviously, I can close them all one tab at a time, but I can also click on these 3 vertical dots, and I can say close all tabs and get rid of all of them. And that might be handier and faster for you. Now, to set up our monitoring and our alerts, you want to go into the main menu. So again, if your navigation panel is not open, go ahead and click up here, open up your navigation panel. Down here at the bottom where the main menu is, click on Manage Data. And the last option down here is Monitoring. Click on Monitoring. Now, you can add your own alerts here. Also, typically when you install various applications, various apps that we have, we may also install some alerts for you. So for example, when I install the AWS Observability app, it goes out here and installs, excuse me, let me double click. It installs all of these app alerts for me, all these alerts or monitors. You can call them alerts, you can call them monitors. They're all the same as far as we're concerned. And you can enable them or disable them as you want. Now, you can, I can, we can go in here to our monitoring, and we can add a folder, and maybe we want to put all our Kubernetes stuff in one folder, or maybe we want it in separate folders based on the cluster, whatever you want. So you can put containers in here, and then you can go in here and create a new monitor. You can also take a monitor that you have that you've created, and you can export it out in JSON, and then you can import it back in. So it gives you reusability of your monitors if you want. If I click on New Monitor, this is where we can create a new monitor. And if I go in here to lab number 5 in our PDF, it wants me to add a new monitor, select metrics. For my metric, it wants me to use cube_pod_status_phase. So back over here, monitor type is metric. I can either do logs or metrics. I want to do metric in this case. And I'm going to start typing in KUBE underscore pod status phase. Phase. Oops, phase. Phase with an H. There you go. Spelling does count. Okay. So basically, if I wanted to, I could run that and I can see my results right now. Okay. And there we go. There I got lots and lots of phases here, right? A lot of historical trend. Now, keep in mind, this is across all of my applications, all of my Kubernetes environments. So maybe what I want to do is I want to filter it a little bit. Maybe what I want to do is I want to look for the phase where the phase equals failed. So I can start typing in here, phase, actually phase equals, and then I've got a choice, running, failed, whatever. So I want to set an alert where the thing said failed, and I'm going to go ahead and hit the enter key here to rerun that query. And ironically enough, when this query runs for the last 3 days, none of my pods have failed, which is nice. It's a good world, that I live in here. Okay. But obviously I want something to fail so I can generate an alert. Okay. And then the last thing I probably want to do is I want to filter based on my specific application. So if I go back here, it says, I want to specify the cluster equals my coffee bar, right? So I can go back up here and I can say, I can start typing it in if I want to, or better yet, there it is at the bottom, cluster equals, and then I want to grab this coffee bar training and I want to run that. So I'm only seeing that particular application. Now, as I said, when I run this query, I get some results. Obviously, I don't have any failures here, which is good. It's not a problem. But if I had failures, I want to alert on those failures. So my point is, when you create a monitor, you define your criteria. What's your query? Then down here on the trigger type, you define, do you want to be notified or alerted or somehow when we suddenly are missing data? Yeah, I do. And I also, not only will it tell you when you're missing data, it will tell you when we recover and we get data back, which is kind of nice. Don't tell me there's a problem. Only tell me the problem and then we've solved it. Under warning, here I can specify a warning at a certain level. So maybe if I have one pod fail within a specific time frame, I want to be notified. That's a warning. Maybe if I have 2 pods fail, that might be a bigger issue. And so I can sit there and set those values. Then down here, if I want to, I can specify, I want to name this monitor the name that I'm using to create it, or I can customize it. I can specify static fields as well as dynamic fields in here, right? Dynamic values. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to go ahead and name it what the monitor name is. And then I can also delay this for a period of time just while I'm testing it out, playing with it, stuff like that. And then the question is, how do you want to be notified? How do I want to do these alerts? Do I want to generate an email? Do I want to go to Jira or Datadog or PagerDuty or something like that? Do I want to send a Slack message? Do I want to send a Microsoft Teams message? Webhook to other systems? HipChat? What other systems do I want to go to? I'll show you where you can make those connections. So just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to say create a new email. Who do I want this email to go to? I'll send it to me, although typically we would probably send it to our network operations center or somebody else. And then what do I want the subject line to say? Again, I can add all these other fields in here if I want to in the subject line or even in the message. And I can put in whatever message I want, Sorry. Now, the question is, when do I want this email to be fired? Do I want it to be fired when we're missing data and we recover? Do I want this email to be fired when we hit the warning level and we recover? So what criteria do I want for this email to fire? Maybe when we have warnings, I want the email to fire, that's great. But then I want to create a notification when things get critical. I want a different notification. I want to start tickling pagers and, start doing things, blast on PagerDuty or whatever systems that you have. Additionally, down here, we get to give our monitor a name. So I'm going to type in my initial. I'm going to call this node crash monitor. And again, I'm going to put it in my monitors folder. And here's where I can put a description in here. And what's really cool about this, what I really love about this, is that I can add a playbook. Okay. I can add a playbook and create a hyperlink into some directions that says, okay, here's how we fix this, right? Imagine if you're working in a nuclear power plant, right? And all of a sudden you got a problem, says we're losing coolant water or coolant pressure or whatever. How do you shut down the plant, right? I don't want to have to look for that. I don't have to think about that. I want step-by-step directions. Well, you can put in here a playbook that's going to provide for them information about how to recover from this, how to troubleshoot this, how to do whatever. So here are the instructions. And I can put in a hyperlink or HTML code or whatever I want. Now, so now what I want to do is I want to save this new monitor. And when I save this new monitor, here it is. I can scroll down. This is the one I created just now. You see it stayed as normal. Here's one I created this morning for the session that I ran this morning. Okay. So I can see that they're all running normal, and that's good news and bad news. Good news is, yeah, I've got nothing to worry about. Bad news is it's going to hard for me to tell a story. If these go to critical or warning, you and I can go up here where the little bell is, and we can see anything in the critical or warning stage. So here I've got a warning on my node crash monitor. I can click on that, and now I can see where my warning level has occurred. I can see all kinds of information here with regards to my various metric data, my metadata here, my metadata tags, as far as what's happening. I might also have some various alert context if this has gone, back to normal and back out, stuff like that. I can also look at my monitor history, which right now I don't have any good history. I can see it's warned once. And then up here, I can click on my playbook, and voila, there's my instructions to recover, shut down, do whatever it is I need to do. So those are how you and I create a monitor. And that's what Lab 5 is doing. We're creating this, setting this stuff up. Now, one little thing I do want to show you before I go away from this conversation. I said we can connect to Slack or HipChat or anything like that. If you go into, again, my monitoring section, there's a section here called connections. And here's where you can create and define connections into things. And if you have administrative rights like I do, you don't, but I do, you can click on the plus sign here, and I can see what is it I want to connect to. ServiceNow, PagerDuty, whatever. If what you're trying to connect to doesn't have a connection here, you can go into webhook and make a connection as long as it's got APIs that you can pass information to. Okay. So that's monitoring. Are there any questions about monitoring? Okay. Very good. Let me go back in, and if you don't mind, I'm going to delete my two monitors. Just as a matter of housekeeping here. I can disable them if I want to, or I can flat out delete them. I'm going to delete them because you can bet in a couple of weeks I'll do this class again, and darned if I won't make some more. So let's so I'll try to keep things clean. All right. All right. So that takes us to lab number 6, which is our last lab for tonight. And in lab number 6, we're going to show you how you can troubleshoot an application in your cluster. So there's a couple different ways I can do this. I can use traces, I can use service map. I'm going to show you both methods here. Okay, so let me go back out here. Let's go to lab 6. It says troubleshoot with traces in the service map. Okay, so back to my Sumo logic environment. Let's talk about the service map. I briefly showed you a slide, but I said I'd get to it later. So again, under my new button here, I've got something here called the service map that I can click on. And here I can see all of the various microservices that are connected into my various applications. And if I want to, I can filter by specific applications. So for example, I only see the coffee bar app. Now, if you think about the coffee bar app, we have a situation where a customer places an order, and we're going to ask them for payment, and there's going to be a microservice that takes care of the payment, right? And then I'm going to sit there and have the Bartista send the information to the Bartista, which is going to go to the machine service, which is then going to grind the beans, and then it's going to add the water and all that good stuff. So what is this map telling me? Well, first of all, the size of my circles are based on the number of requests per seconds I get. I think you might see that in the form of a test question. So just want to give you a heads up. The number of requests per second is what makes the size up. And the fact that any of these are red indicates an abnormality has in fact occurred. Now, if I want to troubleshoot this, I can go into a specific node here. I can click on that node and a little pop-up panel appears. And then I can go into that pop-up panel here and I can say, open up in traces. So traces is another application that shows me the traces of all of my transactions. And when I think of a trace, the word trace, the thing I want you to think of is it's the entire transaction. So John goes and places a order for coffee, right? And they grind the beans and they put the water in there and they take my credit card or whatever and pay it and all that stuff. That is an entire transaction. And that has a trace ID. And then, bear with me, and then Max places an order for coffee or pastries or whatever. Or maybe David places an order for tea. That has a different trace ID. So you and I can, our individual transactions here are based on trace ID. Now, I can, if I want to, go up here to duration, click on it. So it sorts it in descending order for my longest transactions. I can also go over here to this column, which has my number of errors. And I can look for the highest number of errors within the highest duration. So here I've got 13 errors in 5.67 seconds. So this is the transaction that I'm going to open up. And when I click on this transaction, you see all kinds of big old Gantt chart here almost. And what you're seeing is these different colors are my different microservices. So the total time my coffee machine spent was 53% of this time. 53 of my 5.6 seconds was done coffee machine stuff. At the coffee bar, that was 35%. Over here at my coffee bar front end, that was 8% duration-wise. And where it says spans, these are the individual steps that you see right here, and they should match up with the colors that you see here. So, for example, here, if I click here, it says there are 3 spans. Here they are, dark red, 3 spans, okay? Purple, lilac, there are 6 spans. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? Now, the point isn't important, but as far as what you need to understand what spans are and what traces are. So traces is my whole thing. My span is that individual activity. You'll notice that some of these have a red line on top of them. That red line means there's an error. And all I need to do is this span was based on this span, excuse me, I'm sorry, this trace was based on this trace, which is based on this trace, and so forth, so on. So what I want to do is I can filter this and say, I only want to see the ones that have the red line, because it's easy to see the red line over the turquoise or the purple or lilac or whatever you call it. It's kind of hard to see the red over the red here. So that's a little tough. So I can turn this switch on, everything else kind of gets grayed out and ghosted. Now, in here, what I want to do is I want to go to the lowest one with my error, and I want to click on it. And so here I can see information about that specific little span. So here they were trying to prepare my coffee from the server, and it generated something called a 502 error. And again, here's my trace ID and span ID and all that good stuff. If I click on my metadata, here's all the metadata associated with that activity. And if I go into my entities, I can see some charts that dictating my performance as far as latency, request, percentage of error, all that good stuff. But what I want to do is I want to find out why this occurred. So if I go back to my summary, remember my span ID is this little part right here. My trace ID is the entire transaction, okay? So what I want to do is I want to click on this with span ID, and it's going to open up my logs in Sumo Logic, and it's going to show me the logs for this specific span. So here, and the latest messages on top, the earlier messages are below that. So here, hey, I got a new order for coffee, right? And so the next thing it says, oh, I'm sorry, I'm out of grains. I can't give you any grains. I can't grind the beans, therefore I can't produce the order. So I can very quickly see here what caused that error. I'm able to go from my service map into here and identify what the problem was. Now, in lab number 6, where they actually start from the traces. So let me close all this stuff up. And they start from traces. So you can go into traces here. It's just another way of getting in here. And in traces, what we want to do is we want to select specific things. We want to select the specific application. Okay, the coffee bar. So I'm only seeing that for any span. I want to filter only and see coffee bar information here. Okay. Then I want to sort this by duration in descending order. Then I want to look for the highest number of errors within that, and I want to click on that particular trace ID, and then I'm going to go through the same process. I'm going to find where I prepared that coffee. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to open it up in my span ID, and I can see my messages. So you can get there either through the service map or from traces. Either one works, lasts a long time. Now, question I get asked in this class all the time is, John, you've shown us some really cool stuff, but how do I set it up? And the point is, as far as setting up tracing and stuff in your Kubernetes environment and all stuff, we teach that in the observability administration class. And in that observability administration class, you need to have an AWS account, because we're going to spin up an AWS environment for you to play with. We're also going to do a bunch of Kubernetes environments in the command line. So it's not for the faint of heart, but I just want you to be aware that that is typically we'll show you how to set up this tracing, how to install Kubernetes, all of that good stuff. And that's lab 6. And again, showing the little service map there at the end. What questions have you all? Because I've pretty much covered the course. What questions do you all have? Okay, and let's prepare you to take the exam if you want to. So if you want to take the exam, what I need you to do is in our training environment that you're logged into right now, I want you to log out. So again, open up the navigation panel, go down here where it says training plus analyst, whatever number, click on it, click on the sign out, and you can sign out and log out. Okay. Yep, Dave, you're absolutely correct. Good observation. Now, what I need you to do is go to your company's Sumo Logic environment. And I need you to log in as David Taylor or Max, whatever, so that you're logged in with your name, your credentials, your information. Okay. So I want you to go to your company's environment and I want you to log in with your credentials. So I'm going to go to my information here, log in with my credentials. So it has John Meredith down here. Okay. And yours should have your information down there as well. Now, to get to the certification area, it's like we've done before, you click on the home tab there. You click on the certification sub tab and you click on get certified. Now, because you're logged in as you with your credentials, you should see all 5 of these tabs. So as I mentioned before, this is where our self-paced training is. And all of our courses have, and all of our instructor-led courses also have a self-paced version that I would encourage you, if you want to take, you certainly can. It will prepare you for the certification exam just like the instructor-led courses. Where it says here, learn a new skill, if I click on this, these are all of our micro lessons. And we're constantly adding new micro lessons. So you want to learn how to create a partition, you want to learn how to install a collector, you want to, all that fun stuff. We got lots and lots of information here, and you can search by and do whatever. Okay. And I would encourage you to check that out. Again, there's that recorded live training where you got a copy of the slides, you got a copy of the lab guide in case you need it. But our focus today is on this Get Certified area right now. This is what we want to focus on. So I'd like you all to click on Get Certified once you're logged in as you. And before I go into this thing, I want to show you something to make you aware of something. Up here in the upper right-hand corner, you should see an area that says My Profile. And if you click on My Profile, this is your profile. And it should have your first name, your last name, whatever. The only way it's going to have a picture in here is if you decide to put a picture in there. Okay, you can do that, not do that. It's entirely up to you. But more importantly, every time you take an exam and pass it or whatever, you should see your exam information in here. And if you passed it, you should be able to click on View Certificate to see your certificate. You can print it out, whatever you want to do. You can also add it to your certification area in LinkedIn. So this will automatically add the fact that I passed back in 2019 the administration exam into my LinkedIn profile in my certification area. Okay. Now, there's a reason why I mentioned this. If I scroll all the way to the bottom and I click done here, and what we want to focus on is the lovely Kubernetes exam. So if you scroll down, or if you click Kubernetes over here by subject, you'll see the Kubernetes exam. This is the exam that you and I are going to take. Now, from here on out, I don't want you to click and follow me. I'm going to take just a few minutes. I want to explain some things that are very important to you, and then you can take your exam. But please don't follow me, just watch. If I click on this exam, there'll be a button up here to register. You click on that, boom, you're registered. It's free, no fuss, no muss. Then you can start. Before you start, it gives you the information about the exam. 30 questions, you're going to have 60 minutes to complete it. You navigate through the exam. Passing rate is 70. It's an open book, open note environment. Again, it's going to be fill in the blanks, matching text, drag and drop, all that good stuff. When you are happy reading this, you can now click next. Now, when you click next, let me go ahead and hit submit results here because there's a little problem there. Let's do this again. Click next or whatever. Now, here is my exam. I've got 30 questions, 60 minutes. I've already had one attempt at it. Here's my timer up there. When you are ready to start, you click I'm ready to start, and the timer starts. The time will start counting down from 60 minutes. And so the first question here is, Kubernetes is an open source container for orchestrating my software, right? That's what Kubernetes is, orchestration. So I click next and answer that. Match the pre-configured dashboards in the Kubernetes app to their descriptions. Again, cluster explorer, high-level overview of provides an outlet glance of your health of your oops, hold on, I may be wrong there. There we go. There's that one. The health check dashboard is this one, I believe. My nodes dashboard, I'm looking for here is about my nodes, and then down here at the bottom, I'm not sure I got this one right. Security overview dashboard. It provides me information about Falco and my security stuff. Now, the point is, I have answered this question. I'm going to go ahead and click next. Then it says, which app would you install to monitor the control plane node of your Kubernetes cluster? The Kubernetes control plane. I click next. Now, I'm done with this. I've had enough. This is fun. I am going to submit my answers, and there's a reason why I'm doing this for your benefit. So I'm going to click over here to the left, say submit my answers. Obviously, I'm not going to pass. I only answered 3 questions, right? But I'm going to say, hey, look, submit my answers. I'm done, that sort of thing. And here, over here on the left, I can see what questions I got right. And I'll also be able to see what questions I got wrong. Don't know why I got them wrong, but I know I got them wrong. The other thing, and the most important thing, is when you do take this exam and you're very happy because you got over 70 and you passed it, and I'm very happy for you, don't forget to click this submit results button. Because when you click the submit results button, it's going to add it up here to that profile. If you don't click the submit results button, it's not going to put it in your profile. The exam did not happen. So please, when you pass the exam, click the submit results button so you get credit for it. That's my only ask. All right. Any questions about the exam? All right. I am going to, if you'll bear with me a second, take this lovely information. I am going to copy it. I am going to put it in the chat box so that when you do pass your exam, you can go into the chat box, find this form, fill it out, submit it, and within 48 hours, you should get a $15 Uber Eats voucher. If for some reason you don't pass your exam, you can take it again, or you can take it tomorrow, or you can take it whenever the heck you want to. All right. Any questions about the exam? Well, folks, it's a little dark over here on the East Coast, but I wanted to turn on my camera and say thank you very much for joining with me. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. Please be safe. Again, one of you is from Australia, so it's early morning. But again, hopefully everything goes well for you guys. And I'll be here for the next hour while you're taking your exam. So otherwise, thanks a lot for attending. We hope to see you in the class again real soon. Please be safe and stay cool. Thank you much. And I will, with that, stop my video, stop the recording,